Hello, Paul. Welcome to the Dublin Conversations. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Andy. So it's Paul Cheal. I'm based in Sydney, Australia. My background is working in PR and comms the last 2 decades, working in corporate and financial communications, mostly on agency side. So I've worked with a lot of large local and global brands, helping to protect and enhance their reputation. I also host a podcast on PR called Smoke Signal, and I've had the privilege, Andy, of having you on a couple of times and see your journey through the Dublin conversation. So it's good to join you today.
Thank you. Well, let's go on another journey now to Dublin, to what we do call the 5 steps to the Dublin window, and where we explore some new thinking and really have a chance for a conversation to talk you through it and welcome your feedback and any challenging or affirmation of the contents. So we're in a context, we're in a communications industry that's going through paradoxical change, both with greater fragmentation, but also greater convergence. And we need to rethink established ideas and also reap the dividend from new knowledge from a whole range of sources. And if we can co-create new ideas to both do our jobs better and also rise to societal challenges, this would be a worthwhile exercise. And we really believe that we need to unlearn some of our existing thinking so we can discard ineffective, outdated ideas while embracing fresh concepts and growing new insights. So what does better look like? So let's take this, what we call the 5 steps to the Dublin window. So step 1 is really about the need that at the moment, like existing disciplines like advertising, public relations, create a universe where very much they're at the centre of it. And we're alluding that's very much like the early astronomers who can come up with very elaborate explanations, but fundamentally wrong explanations. And we believe that we need to establish a bigger worldview where at the heart of it is the need to earn confidence. Confidence, not so much in the general use of the word of like, where it really used as like self-confidence, but more in its statistical sense of its probability of aligning with a reality that others will agree with. And you have confidence in your consciousness and what you perceive as reality being real. You have confidence in who you are, your purpose and purposefulness, confidence in others to help, not harm you. And also you need to earn confidence with others so that you can seen as help them, not harm them. And there's a wider zeitgeist confidence of a mood of the times. And we're saying that confidence, while it's a well-known, often used word, it's a really sort of critically little-known concept and understood concept in the field of communications. And we're saying that purpose and purposefulness makes it easier to create confidence by being more coherent and compelling. So we've got the first step there of this sort of need for a new worldview. Any thoughts on that, Paul?
Yeah, I think confidence is an interesting concept for the communication profession, right? I think it's still very much an art as much as a science, right, in terms of communication. So being able to, be confident in the advice that you're giving, be confident in the outcomes you're able to deliver for organizations is vital. So, my side hustle actually is a measurement platform. It's called the Communication Dividend, and that's all about helping give confidence to practitioners to be able to lean into conversations that may be difficult by using data, by using technology and tools that are now available to be able to do that. So I think this idea of confidence is a really important one that we need to back ourselves. And I also think, post-COVID, the role of communications now has been seen front and center how important it is. So it's an opportunity for the profession as a whole to step into that now and to we have a duty to maintain that position that we've now attained, that seat at the table. And to do that, we've got to be confident that what we're doing is right and what we're doing is helping our organisations.
That's an interesting point in that there's an opportunity out there in that to seize leadership. And I've said in the past that certainly professions like public relations have never missed an opportunity to miss an opportunity, in the sense of, the emergence of the internet, Google Penguin and so on, that there's some great opportunities that seemingly not harnessed. So it's an interesting point you raised there about we're in this sort of rich time for our potential, but we need to seize it there.
So I think I'd make a point just on that, on the purposefulness side of that context is we need to understand what our purpose is and what we're delivering for organizations, but also individually what our purpose is. And I was lucky enough to go through with you, Andy, and do, build my own personal purpose, and go through that process through the Dublin conference. Dublin conversations, and that kind of gives you that understanding of insight into, well, what are you trying to do as an individual and as a professional, and I think that gives you confidence in itself.
Thank you, Bill. And I understand you've got a legacy from that serves as a daily reminder to you.
It does. It's sitting on my screen. It's on my screensaver on my computer. So every time I turn it on, I see, on those hard days, it's when things get challenging, I can see, well, there's a bigger picture here and a bigger purpose.
And then, so moving on then to the idea then, in order to connect with others, there's sort of 5 key dimensions. This has been inspired by the work of people like Professor Daniel Kahneman, who identify we're emotionally driven animals, but these 5 rules of thumb, or what are known as heuristics, if you can achieve one or more of these, then you've got a greater chance of successful interaction. And the 5 rules, as we call them, being known and noticed, which aligns really with traditional industry practice of gaining awareness. Liked, not in a Facebook sense of likes, but likability, not just effective liking, but you could be respected, admired. And there's even a paradox of liking someone to disliking someone, and liking the fact that you dislike them. And then there's trust. Front of mind, which even though you may be well known, we're cognitive misers. Essentially, our brains are lazy and choose the easy available option. So you need to make yourself available front of mind to others to engage. And the last one, being talked about, social proof. Any thoughts about this and how it potentially could scope, and certainly the Dublin conversation believes this essentially frames any campaign. Any thoughts there, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of the first frameworks that you shared with me, and it's kind of become second nature for me now to think about things in this way. I've actually, can't say I've finished it, but I was inspired to kind of get Daniel Kahneman's book, but it's a thick read, so I'm kind of not through to the end of it at the moment. But I mean, I think you're right. I think a communication strategy should look at these elements, right? And I think it's a much more nuanced approach than, say, an organization will sometimes come along and go, oh, we want to build awareness. Okay, well, what's that? What do you need that for? What's the purpose? Whereas this is a bit more nuanced, right? Like, what do we actually need? We need to be trusted, or we need to be talked about. We need advocates for our brand, and would enable you, using a framework like this to dive into that that goal a bit deeply.
And you mentioned there your interest in measurement and evaluation, and I think potentially these could serve as interesting key measures in any future dashboard.
Love it. Hadn't even thought about that, but that is that's a great idea, because you could easily have metrics that align to each of these. Yep.
Yeah, and
well, and also when it comes to measurement, we have those traditional ones, right, of inputs, outputs, outtakes, outcomes, which no one, no one outside, and probably a lot of people within our profession know, what that actually means. But if you were to frame it like this with the C-suite, okay, we're getting liked. Okay, well, what are the metrics that show that we're trusted? Yeah. What are the metrics? Like, it brings it into that language that's you can share internally.
This having great potential there. And then step 3 is about how having identified what you need to do, how can you do it? And so this is an evolution of the PESO model of paid, earned, shared, and owned. But fundamentally, these opens choices, not channels. So identify your strategic options. And own is not just own channels, but your own reputation, behaviors, even spending time with someone is a way of earning trust. And then a new dimension of nudge, which is really how do you make choices easier for people in the way you'd like them to go, so you can influence behaviors without actually communicating with people. So it provides a sort of an evolution, and it's choices, not channels. Any thoughts about this as a potential framework?
Yeah, I mean, I think the PESO model is now well known, and I really like the addition of nudge. I remember years ago, I had a pitch, and we put nudge, as a strategy for this organisation. We didn't win the pitch, but from then on, I've always kind of been, I really like this idea of using nudges and micro nudges to change behaviour. So I think that's a great addition. and agree, the idea of choices rather than these are channels or platforms, they are, you know, strategic decisions about how we're going to reach the audiences that we're looking to reach is a strong way to think about it.
I think implicit in your response there, Paul, is the idea that when we connect with others, it's not just to sort of deliver a message, but to achieve some form of outcome beyond just like, I've messaged these people. Would that be your view?
That's right. What's the actual, you know, what are they thinking, doing, or, you know, differently, right? Versus just, yeah, we've reached that person. And
then we move on to step 4 about what's called emergent, how our environment and the world is shaped by emerging from the bottom up. And a very simple model here developed by Professor Gareth Loudon of Imperial College London really sort of provides an explanation for creativity, but also how we engage and grow. And the listen, connect, do model is that you listen, you connect this with new things, and that could be developing an idea or implementation, and a continuous loop with purpose at its heart. And the stronger the sense of purpose, the more vibrant the flow of listening, connect, doing. And it emphasizes the need to listen to bottom up and top down. But also what's emerging in the industry is this label called comms. And the Dublin Conversation believes we need a label to describe this bigger world we're operating within. And comms, the word comms could be a potential candidate, but has not been defined yet. And so we're proposing a draft definition of comms being how you create confidence within yourself and with others to exist, coexist, cooperate, or collaborate by managing perceptions around your future behaviours, which is fundamental to being purposeful. Just wondering, and further on that sociologists can now establish what almost like the equivalent of universal laws of human nature, of which is that 2 out of 3 people will help a stranger and 1 out of 3 don't. And we're suggesting that represents maybe some key instincts that can lead to what we call we-led thinking, where your instinct is to think of the communal good others first, and me-led thinking, where it's a self-interest first. And there's potential here to develop maybe a philosophy or an attitude that could be labelled, say, a public relations approach around we-led, and maybe an advertising approach around me-led. So some big ideas there, Paul. Any thoughts on that at all?
Yeah, I mean, I really like the graphic there, this idea that we listen, connect, and do, and kind of that's centered around the purpose, and that listening is a key part, right? I think that's often overlooked in comms, that we need to listen more, we need to listen to the audience. To your last point, yeah, I really like that idea of you know, PR being we-led and advertising. Not sure how they think of that being led, but it kind of intuitively that makes sense about what we're trying to do. You know, the comms piece is interesting for me. I don't think I've been able to get my head around that bigger picture that you've talked about, and I know we've had a few discussions on that. So I guess it's just trying to step out and look at bigger picture and see kind of where a new definition comes in. I think our challenge, right, is people don't know what public relations is. So how do we create something new, and then, you know, explain what that is? So yeah, that's the challenge on that front for me.
Well, certainly anyone who's launched a new brand knows the massive task of getting something new known. And I think the Dublin Conversations view is that this word comms, no one's seemingly invented it, but it's grown out of the computer technology industry and so on. And it's been sort of widely adopted. I think one study we did at the UK PR Week magazine, about 40+% of articles reference comms. And the suggestion we're making is that comms is bigger than communications, which may be a big handicap in getting it widely accepted, because it might be just seen as communications, but also includes managing behaviours, influencing behaviours, being purposeful, and building social cohesion as well. So it's a bigger land. The analogy I use is a bit like integrated communications is like a chess set, but comms is both the chess set and the chess player, and ensuring the player plays the game within the rules, respects their opponent, and so on. So it's a bigger picture in that way, which we believe we need a label for, and there's a potential candidate there. And again, really open up for discussion and exploration for its the need for and its potential. So I think what you quite rightly highlighted there, Paul, the massive challenge of and is there an argument that maybe PR relations isn't understood because actually, as I say, it's not got necessarily a coherent philosophy, process. PR never became a verb, so unlike say advertising. So there's a number of a whole host of issues there. So I appreciate the comments there. And then
yeah,
lastly,
it's just, I guess it's just the to what end, right? To what end and purpose is that use of that term?
Yeah, I think where we come from Dublin conversations is that we see words as tools, and the more greater precision the meaning has, the more surgical like then they can be employed, and we've got a more powerful, more effective tool as a result of that. And as I say, you can go around the route of like semantics and the argument. I mean, one thing I got involved in this idea about 10 years ago with. By posing for 7 years, I was posing the wrong question of we need to redefine public relations, which is not only the wrong question but unhelpful, because we now take the view that public relations potentially can exist, but as part of a bigger picture, and it may be the reason it had that sort of flawed rationale, flawed philosophy that it hasn't got a wider acceptance, possibly. I think.
Yeah, it's potentially a more sensitive topic for me at the moment, in that the Public Relations Institute of Australia is looking to rebrand, right, and potentially drop off. They're currently consulting on getting rid of public relations in the term, right? So there is a kind of lot of discussion at the moment here about, well, what would that look like, and what are the right terms that we should be using to describe, what we, both what we do and what you've talked to there, right? The broader environment.
Yeah. And, well, I think it's useful it's having that conversation. To its credit, it's having that conversation, and certainly, hopefully, we can be on their radar in terms of extending the scope and consideration within that. So so it's a major issue for both the Institute and Australia, but we believe in the world of communications as well. But and I suspect the instinct driving both is the fact that we need to have a bigger picture rather than just looking within what we currently define as public relations. So just moving on then to the last step, for step 5, that we concept of regenerative comms, so that you go beyond the sort of traditional two-way communications model that is essentially frames existing public relations and communication practice, and look at a three-way communications where you not only look to get win-win outcomes for respecting yourself and the other person you're engaging with, but there's a third dimension that you need to replenish and enhance trust, togetherness, and a sense of being open to understanding of others in any transaction, in an interaction, and so that you're investing in the ecosystem that allows you to communicate and engage in the first place, rather than just solely focus on two sides engaging with each other. I just want to. And at the heart of what this is this idea of purposeful trust, that idea developed from Professor Jim McNamara in Australia of a distrust-trust continuum, and that you can be disengaged, or over-trusting, and over-trusting can lead to naivety, but also, we believe, to prejudice and bias and dogma, and that there's this middle zone of purposeful trust that allows interaction to happen, and the danger is that can become toxic, polluted, and therefore really diminish our capability and ability to connect with one another. So I just wonder, any thoughts on this sort of idea at all?
Yeah, I think this is a game changer, right? And I didn't get it reading this slide. We spoke about it just before we started recording, and you've kind of reinforced it then. But this really is, rewriting the textbooks on public relations, right? And I think in a positive way, saying, okay, we understand the theory of two-way, and when communications and PR is done well, that's what we're at. But this idea of a bigger social cohesion piece, or a social need, or a social element to the communication program, I think is a bit of gold that's hidden back here in step 5. Like this to me is kind of headline almost around a new way of thinking about comms. And if we could get Grunig to kind of look at that and kind of revisit the excellence theory and look at it from a contemporary perspective, then this is I think what we'd find, right, that organizations now need to, PR practitioners need to think about not only, outcomes for them and outcomes for their stakeholders, but outcomes for society as well.
Thank you very much. And then lastly, then, having done our journey, how do you feel after doing the 5 steps there? Do you feel more confident about addressing what does better look like for the communications industry?
Yes, I think the key piece of this is how do we step people through this and help them through that journey. And how do we scale that, right? It can't be you having a conversation with every practitioner, but how do we scale that idea of you've got this toolkit, here's how you use it, and how does that kind of grow exponentially over time?
Yeah. And going forward, what sort of things do you think the Dublin conversation should be doing different or doing more of, or what do you think is a way forward for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think this idea of how do we amplify the conversation. So whether that's through industry bodies, whether that's through partnerships, or how do you kind of get the word out there? I know we've done a few things on the podcast and things like that. I guess it's just how do you do your PR more effectively? Maybe it is so that it kind of grows, right? Because I feel like you've got some great thinking, and it's really just about getting more practitioners across that thinking.
Yeah. Paul, thank you so much for sharing the time and some rich and valuable insights and challenges, and from which I think both of us grow anew from the collective thinking created there. So, Paul, massive thanks, and good luck with your new tool, the measurement, and good luck in your work in practice.
Yeah, no, thank you, Andy. I'm a big supporter of the Dublin conversation, so it's good to see it continuing to grow.
Thank you so much, Paul.